Hi, this is Theo, and you are listening to a special edition of Between Two Trains. This week we bring you all the candidates for Chamblee City Council. And now, Between Two Trains.
Welcome, we're back with another Between Two Trains, and today we're interviewing Shaun Lewis, who is running for Chamblee City Council. Shaun, welcome to Between Two Trains. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Ben.
Let's start off with getting the people to know who you are. You live in the downtown district of Chamblee. You're running for city council against Leslie Robeson in her district. But tell us a little bit about, we know that a city council gig is a part-time gig. You have to have another job.
That's correct.
So tell us about your profession, what you do when you're not running for city council.
All right, so currently I work for the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program, 5 miles down the street, right in North Druid Hills. We help veterans who are battling with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, anxiety, depression, the invisible wounds of service. I lead an outreach team of 5 veterans who go to different bases, different medical facilities, and different symposiums throughout the country to educate people on the symptoms of PTSD and to help people find the path to recovery. I'm a military veteran myself. I served in the United States Army for 18 years, 3 years active duty, 15 and counting in the Army Reserve. I'm an engineer, which means I mostly focus on construction, infrastructure assessments and development, mobility and counter mobility, 2 overseas tours, one of them combat. So that's what I do.
Nice. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
First off, how long have you actually lived in Chamblee?
So I lived in Chamblee a little over 4 years now.
Okay. And what brought, Atlanta's a big area, obviously. There are a lot of different places people can live. Why Chamblee? What brought you to Chamblee over, say, Sandy Springs or Dunwoody or any of the other cities?
So my wife and I moved here to the Atlanta metro area 13 years ago, and we've lived in a few different areas within Atlanta and some of the surrounding suburbs. And when we were finally looking to buy a home, we started doing an in-depth search in multiple places in Atlanta, in Decatur, in some of the northern suburbs, and we just fell in love with Chamblee. The small town community feel here, but you're right here on MARTA. You have the city right on your front patio, but you come back and then Chamblee has this small feel where you can go to your local bar and meet and talk to your city council members, talk to the mayor, know everybody. You go places, everybody knows your name. It's just a phenomenal environment and one of the best cities I've ever lived in. It really is the absolute center of the universe.
Well, I love that line as well, the actual center of the universe. But now that you're here, you've been here for 4 years, you obviously said, hey, I want to run for office. What prompted that decision to run for local office?
So the decision is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. I've spent most of my career in service in the military and through my civilian career. Most of my career has been in working in education and in nonprofits. I spent a couple years as a school teacher in Atlanta Public Schools. After that, then I had a deployment. Then coming back, I decided to switch paths. So I went to law school at Georgia State University. I earned the Atlanta Law School Fellowship, which covered the cost of that as well as the beginning foundation scholarship. And I interned at the Georgia Department of Education. And when I got out, I really wanted to work in a field that gave back. I want to work in advocacy. So I worked at a couple different nonprofits. I worked for Hire Heroes USA up in Alpharetta, which helps veterans transition and find work. And I helped over 300 veterans find careers or find better careers. And then for the past couple of years, I've been working with the Emory Healthcare System. And I enjoy giving back to my community and having part in growth and development of my community. And here in Chamblee, we are growing so rapidly. And I think Chamblee is moving in the right direction. We're on the right track. But I'm concerned that some of our growth isn't being managed as well as it could be. I don't want to speak ill or negative of anyone in the city council. I think they're doing a good job, and I'm not privy to all the information that they are privy to. But as someone who lives downtown and has to deal with the effects of our growth, the traffic that's coming when you put in a 500-person headquarters, I want to make sure that smart things are being done to make sure that that has a minimal impact on the people here and we can mitigate the impact in any way we can. doing traffic studies right up front before we make any decisions, finding the best ways to mitigate those impacts, and finding ways to continue our growth while maintaining Chamblee's culture and what makes Chamblee so unique.
Well, for our listeners that have listened to us regularly, they know I'm pretty passionate about our business community and our Chamber of Commerce. So I want to talk a little bit about your views on our business community. Let's start with, do you think Chamblee is a business-friendly city?
I think it is. I think there's always room for improvement. As we're growing and as we're beginning in more developments which require national chains with AAA credit ratings, it's getting harder and harder to be a small business owner in Chamblee. And I think that there are ways that we can improve that environment for our small business owners to make sure that they can continue to be here, not get pushed out, but also continue not just be here, but to thrive and develop in our community. We have a tremendously diverse business community from business to business providers. We have the historical manufacturing base. We're getting a huge service industry with the restaurants, and we're should be getting, or we're promised, a booming retail industry, which has yet to really develop. But I think a lot of that is due to access to those spaces. Not having sidewalks, not having parking to get to a lot of these businesses that are coming in. So I think if we build an environment, we can bring people in and people can access those businesses, and we can help those businesses exist and be here, those businesses will thrive.
You kind of sort of took the air out of my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You mentioned the small mom and pop, the small business, and with all the new development going on in Chamblee, we've seen that the valuation of property is going up and rents are rising, and that's creating more of a challenge for the mom and pop to be able to afford to rent space in Chamblee. Do you feel that the city has any obligation to sort of help mitigate those rising rents to make sure that the businesses that have been the backbone of our community for decades don't get, like you said earlier, pushed out?
Oh, the city has an obligation to all of its residents and all of its business owners. Everyone who lives here, everyone who has a business here, everyone who works here is a shareholder. We're all paying for this. Through our taxes, through our revenue taxes and employment taxes if you work here, and through the backbone, through the work of the people who've been the mom and pop businesses, who've been the foundation of this. They're the reason we're succeeding as much as we are now. So we definitely owe an obligation to those businesses. There's a certain amount of progress. We're not going to be able to save every business. There are some businesses going to be pushed out. There's some people who are going to be able to sell their land and do really well as we develop. So we're not going to be able to maintain all of the businesses, but I think that, Chamblee has an obligation to help those businesses, help the community, to help the people who live here and the people who made Chamblee great to begin with.
Well, knowing where you live in the downtown, I'm really interested to hear the answer to this next question, because we know that the commercial areas in the downtown are having a bit of a problem with parking. There's limited parking in downtown. What transportation alternatives do you see as a good solution to solve some of our downtown parking problems?
Well, some of the parking solutions are already in the works. Just the process needs to be expedited. So, a parking area for people commuting in here, but we really need to look at other transportation alternatives. We have the MARTA station right here, but when you go to the MARTA station, you can't walk very far. You can't get to many places. I said I moved here just over 4 years ago. I had a pretty severe accident before I moved here, and when I moved here, I was in a wheelchair. I was wheelchair bound for several months, my first few months in Chamblee.
Wow.
I had an accident, had 8 surgeries on my leg, I won't get into the details, but I was in a wheelchair first few months, and I remember trying to explore Chamblee, and I rolled out of my condo and went across the street on Peachtree Road and was rolling up the sidewalk of the MARTA going down to, I think I was going to Chamblee 101. I signed up for that. And I'm rolling down there, and I get a quarter or a third of the way down, and the sidewalk stops. And there's a big planter right in the middle of it. And there's a huge curb, and I'm not skilled enough on a wheelchair yet to hop off a curb. And also, my leg is in this external fixator, which just has metal rods going into it. So I'm just stuck there, so I just have to turn around and roll my wheelchair back down to the side kind of frustrating and humiliating. And then I go across the street, then I decide to go up on the other side of the road, and I get up to our past where Union Hill was, and then the sidewalk ends, and I have to roll my sidewalk or my wheelchair in the street to get to Chamblee City Hall. That's insane. A city like Chamblee doesn't have sidewalks where people can get everywhere. And I know in my building, I know at least 2 of my neighbors that I know personally have limited mobility. I know that there's 2 neighbors in the complex across the street who are wheelchair bound, and one who has limited vision. And it's a great place for people with mobility issues because they're right by MARTA. They can live here and get to anywhere in the city, but they can't go places in their own neighborhood. And that's one. I love Chamblee. I think Chamblee's phenomenal, but that's one thing since day one that has really disturbed me, that all of our citizens can't get to the rest of our neighborhood. So just increasing the accessibility through sidewalks, through bike lanes is going to be a huge part of that. Chamblee, just looking at square mileage, is not that big of a city geographically. There's no excuse not to be able to get anywhere within the city, at least not anywhere commercial within the city. Also, we've got to look at other modalities of transportation. I know a lot of people are talking about scooters. And
I was going to ask, what's your opinion? Because I've asked all the other people that have come on the show about scooters. You know, we see scooters in other communities in Atlanta. But we've also heard a lot of horror stories about scooters. What's your take?
I think scooters can be a positive addition to our mobility options, but we have to have the infrastructure first. Right now, scooters are going on our sidewalks, which are incomplete, end abruptly, are too narrow, or they're going on the streets, which just aren't prepared to handle them. City of Atlanta has had 4 scooter deaths in the last year. I think it leads the nation in scooter deaths. We don't want that in Chamblee. We need the infrastructure to handle them. Once we have bike lanes, then scooters would make far more sense, be a lot safer. So we need to go about it intelligently. We need to have a smart and practical way to handle these new technologies. So bike lanes that bicycles and scooters can access, and we need to make sure to have a way that the scooters can be deposited without being strewn across the sidewalks and
just
blocking
littered everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's inevitable, but we have to manage it smartly, and we can't just allow them to come in without planning for it and without managing that.
I've heard someone talk about putting in designated Uber stops. Is that something that you think would help downtown if there was a parking space that was designated strictly for Uber so that they can get in and get out?
To be honest, that's not something that I've ever looked at.
Okay.
So I'm a data person. I need numbers. I want to see studies. Just going off my gut, which once again, I would never go off my gut. I would look at the facts. But if you want to say something off my gut, I don't feel like that's necessarily a good idea. I've seen it at the airport. I've seen it at multiple airports and other places. And you get lines and you get cancellations, and it just doesn't work as well. But if there's studies out there to prove that it can be done correctly, I'm completely open to having my mind changed.
Well, let's switch gears for a second and talk about housing prices. Since the recession, we've seen that over the last decade, valuations of properties have gone up. In Chamblee, over the last, say, 5 years, the house price has raised dramatically. But we've also seen an influx into Chamblee of a younger demographic.
Correct. The
millennials are coming in droves to Chamblee. And, as a financial planner, what I've seen is that young people like the fact that the house, they buy a house and their value's going up because they look at that as an increase in their net worth, and they're just building their net worth. Whereas someone who's older, like myself, and been around for a long time, just sees that as an increase in property taxes.
Right.
So, I guess my question is, what solutions do you think or do you want to support where we can still increase our property values in our community, but also ensure that our senior citizens and our older residents are not all of a sudden priced out and have to move somewhere else?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's huge. I mean, as a first-time homeowner here in Chamblee over the past 4 years, I've been looking at the comparable sales around me. At first, I'm really ecstatic because I think, wow, my value's going up so much, I could sell and make so much more money, but then I still want to live in Chamblee, so if I sell and want to buy something else, it's going to be just as expensive. So It's really, the only benefit is right now higher taxes. So it's always a catch-22 of growth and development, because you want this to be a city that's desirable. You want the city that brings people in, because that adds to the vitality of the city, that adds to our overall income, that adds to our resiliency. But the tricky part is having affordable housing options for the people who are already here, for the people who are on fixed incomes, and for the people who are coming here that may be working in the service industry jobs that don't have the tech incomes or the higher incomes. They still need a place to live so they can work here in Chamblee. And unfortunately, there's really not an easy answer. This is something that every city in the U.S. right now is struggling with, almost every city. And in the list of problems to have, it's one of the better problems to have, because it does show that we are growing, we are developing. But we have to have affordable housing and housing at all different levels. So I know that some of the improvements, we have some condos coming in that are coming in very small and at lower prices than the average. Multi-family developments are a big part of that. And working with seniors and working with people with fixed incomes to find ways, if we can give any kind of, I think at the city council level, there's a lot of stuff that's not going to be in our control as far as their tax rates. But whatever we can do to alleviate some of that pain and give them some relief, because we don't want to see anyone being pushed out.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the things in some of your statements about what you're passionate about, but if you're elected, what do you see as what you'd like to try to accomplish over the next 4 years? Okay,
so I have really 3 areas of focus. The first 2 I've talked about quite a bit, but I'll go over them again. The first one is really smart growth. I want Chamblee to continue to grow, but we have to manage that in a smart way, a thoughtful way, in a way that includes all of our shareholders, all of our citizens. So lots of mixed land use, creating a range of housing opportunities at different levels, creating walkable neighborhoods, and maintaining our distinctive qualities that make Chamblee Chamblee and not a generic strip mall suburb. The second one is mobility for all. No matter who you are, where you live in Chamblee, you should be able to get to Chamblee, anywhere in Chamblee, easily. So I'm really focusing on sidewalks and bicycle lanes, because that's how I get to most places in Chamblee. But also parking for those people who live in Huntley Hills and live in other areas and need to drive to downtown. We need to have adequate parking. We need to have a variety of transportation options. And also connecting Chamblee to other cities. Expanding the rail trail, connecting it to the Peachtree Creek Greenway, which will eventually connect to the Beltline, which when we talk about bringing in younger people, bringing in millennials, we get access to the Beltline. That's going to be huge. And it's also just going to make it a more pleasant place to live, because you're going to be able to go visit businesses in Brookhaven and these other places, and people from those places can more easily come to our businesses. It's a tide that raises all boats. And then the last thing, which I haven't really talked about, is maximizing community engagement. You go to the city council meetings in the downtown, you're on the downtown development committee, so you go to all those, I know. I know the last downtown development meeting had a lot of people, but generally, city council and downtown development, how many people show up?
Not many.
Not many at all. So we have a population of over 29,000.
That's why we video record our meetings.
You do. Right now, the city council doesn't. So what I want to do is, there's a lot of people who would be engaged, but who have a lot going on. We have a very high income, average household income in Chamblee, higher than the city of Atlanta, higher than the nation. We have people who are really productive, really busy. Not everybody can make it to every city council meeting. Not everybody can make it to every downtown development meeting. So every meeting needs to be live streamed. So if I'm in Seattle for a business trip, well, I'm going to be city council, so I'll be there. But if a citizen is in Seattle for a business trip, in their hotel room, they can log in and watch the city council meeting. They can know what's being said and what's being addressed. We need to find a way to have them to be able to make comment digitally through email or through some other live comment source. As long as we can identify and confirm who they are, there's no reason they can't make comment on the record from remotely. So we need to have access, make it easier for people to engage. So streaming, making an archive of videos is easily accessible, easily watchable, making it so that people can comment remotely, and a lot of it is just going to be listening. I foresee that being the lion's share of my job, is just listening to our citizens, listening to our stakeholders, listening to what's important to them, and taking that to the council meetings and making decisions based off that, because I have my priorities. I have the things that I see that I think could be done better, that could be changed, and I feel strongly about those, but I'm not representing just myself. I'm representing all of Chamblee. So I want to hear what everyone has to say and bring that to the table, and you can't please everybody. That's never going to happen, but I want to build a consensus and make Chamblee work for as many people as possible.
Well, we're almost out of time, so I just want to end with allowing you one final opportunity to express to the listeners why they should elect you as their next city council representative.
Outstanding. If you elect me as your next city council representative, I promise to give 110% to make sure that Chamblee, pardon me, to make sure that Chamblee stays on track, that we continue to grow in a smart way that represents our community and works for all of our community members. I pledge to make Chamblee a more mobile environment for sidewalks, bicycles, cars, any mode of transportation, so that we can have everyone access all the great things that are coming to the city. And I'm really going to make sure that I get maximum engagement, so that everyone out there who is living in the city and who is being affected by the policies we enact has a voice in those policies.
Well, thank you, Shaun. We appreciate you coming on the show. Good luck in November, and we'll be watching closely to see how the outcome is.
Thank you for having me.